Hello everybody and welcome back for another Clifton Conversation. It's great to have you with us this afternoon. Today, Clifton Conversations is especially delighted to be talking to award-winning choreographer Frances Rings, who is currently Associate Artistic Director of Bangarra, the Indigenous Contemporary Dance Company. Now, she lived in Coaldale for about 15 years, so she knows this place pretty well, even though she doesn't live here anymore. But the good thing is that Bangarra tours to Wollongong, so she comes back from time to time. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that Clifton School of Arts is on Dharawal country and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, past, present, and future. Frances was born in Adelaide, but grew up in Ceduna in Western Australia of both German and Kokatha descent. She attended NASDA before being invited to join Bangarra by Stephen Page and has performed with the company here and overseas, as well as dancing for a bit with the Alvin Ailey Dance Company in the US. She is head of creative studies at NASDA, which means she has a really influential role in the next generation of Indigenous dancers. Frances, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Caroline.
Now, I have to ask you straight up, you are from Desert Mob, so what drew you to living on the coast of New South Wales?
Well, firstly, I just would like to acknowledge that I live on Guringai land, which is on the central coast, and I work on Gadigal land in Sydney. I guess to answer your question, I have to correct you. It's South Australia. I'm a South Australian.
You're a South Australian.
Yeah. Okay. So Ceduna is actually on the west coast of South Australia.
Okay, that's confusing. I was sure it's WA. Thank you for that. My geography's not great.
It's all good. It's very close to the West Australian border.
Phew.
So yeah, I'm a West Coast girl. I grew up in Port Augusta, actually. Went to school there, and my father worked on the ways. I don't know what drew me to. I mean, I'm married to a saltwater man, so I guess that helps. But also, you know, we've always, even though it's we're in the area of South Australia where I live, it's renowned for its surf as well, and it's you know, we're very close to the Nullarbor Plain and to the Great Australian Bight and the whale breeding grounds. It's a big nursery for the southern right whales. So we've got big whale dreaming, and I like to think that when we moved to Woombarra, and we're in Scarborough first and then Woombarra, but I remember the house, the little cottage that we had on the cliff, just 5 doors down from the Scarborough Hotel. I couldn't believe I walked into the backyard and just look out and just see whales. And I like to think that that was my connection back to my country and back to my home. Seeing this migration of whales that went past, and knowing that you know, that those whales that had, you know, that continue their migration with their, you know, when my mother and my, you know, grandmother and down in South Australia, and that they could also see that migration as well. So
well, and we are watching it go past right now, so it's interesting that you should mention whale dreaming, because I feel that we're absolutely in the middle of whale dreaming this very moment. It's the season, of course.
And actually, like when I met some of the Dharawal mob from the area, and they spoke, they told me about like when they used to sing to the whales, and they would get in the Nawi and they would go out and call the whales. Some beautiful stories that they shared, and that was a beautiful little connection to the living history that still exists there. And I love that they were able to share that with me after living there for so long.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. Do you ever think Frances, I'm just thinking of this now, that there's something, I know, you know, your husband is a saltwater man, but do you ever think that there's anything, a connection in a way or a relationship between the movements of swimming and the movements of dancing?
Oh, no doubt. I think that movement is connected to everything that we do, our experiences. You know, we're born in water. That's our, you know, that's our connection from birth and in utero. It's water is such an important part of who we are. And Yeah, absolutely. You know, when I dance, I used to think that the space around me was water, and I could make the water ripple, or I could make it still, or I could make it into a giant storm. But
Wow.
you know, it was this the way that I kind of created, I guess, a connection to the space around me, and being able to kind of um, you know, dynamically interact and activate the space in my own way. So, you know, using elements, I suppose, to help embody what I wanted.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think of as a signature of everything that Bangarra does, is that deep connection to every element, you know, earth, wind, air, fire, all of them are so kind of integrated into the work. Let's just go back to your childhood, because I'm curious about how, coming from where you come from, you got to where you got. And I love the fact that watching dance on television was an important stepping stone for you in terms of seeing what was possible by watching Young Talent Time. And then when you were 16, you were taken to see a show, and that was really life-changing. Can you tell us about that?
You know, when you're a child and you're just connecting your stories with the environment, or creating a world, or using your imagination, all of these things, the same tools that I use in the studio now when I create and I choreograph were the same tools that I used when I was, you know, imagining, you know, this theatrical place, this world. I didn't know it was theatre. I didn't know it was a career. It doesn't feel like a job, because I feel like we are telling our stories, and that's really important, that this is a platform and a vehicle to tell those stories. But, you know, going back, it always felt very natural to me. It always felt normal um, to express, to dance, to move, to create story, and to make sense of the world around me. I couldn't find the words to communicate that, but I found that through movement and through other ways. I wanted to do dance lessons when I was younger, but you know, we just couldn't afford to send me to classes. So it wasn't until I was 16 and in my my year 11, and HSC dance had just been brought in as a it was on the syllabus, HSC syllabus. So yeah, it was the first time I was able to start formally studying dance, and it was a trip to Sydney and seeing Cats at Theatre Royal that I fell in love, and I just wanted to do that with my life. Yeah, I finished my last exams, year 12, and jumped on the bus, arrived in Sydney, auditioned, was accepted, and then trained for 5 years. And yeah, I haven't really looked back.
I wanted to ask you about a couple of really significant works that you've choreographed for the company. Unaipon and Terrain. Terrain, maybe I can see where the idea for that work might come from. But Unaipon, really unlikely character, perhaps, to build a dance piece around. So can you just explain how you take someone who you think is a significant Indigenous figure, who's been overlooked, whom we don't know enough about? That's all a given. But how you translate that into the vocabulary of movement and the dazzling kind of imagery that you built around his story.
When I was first told about him, my sister told me about his story, and She grew up when we were separated as children, my little sister and I. She went to live with a Nudgee family from, they were from South Australia. They lived in Murray Bridge, and her foster mother was from the same community that David Yanaipon was from, which is at the mouth of the Murray River. And yeah, so she told me about him, and I was very ashamed to say that I'd not heard anything or known anything about this incredible man. It disempowered me. And I thought, how do we get people to learn our history? And it became kind of a bit of an obsession to kind of see that these things are, people are given, non-Indigenous people are given the opportunity to not only learn about Indigenous history, but also to know, to learn it from the people. Any work that we do, we go back to the community, to the family, to get permission, and they guide how we tell that work. So it's with their permissions, what we can use, what we can't use, they share insight and information. We go into country, so we really get this kind of immersion into the story, and we at the gift back to the community is going back and doing a performance for them and doing workshops and some outreach as well. But yeah, so I went back with my sister and met the family, and I was just fascinated by their stories that they had to tell about this man, and seeing his community. His community is just beautiful. It's, besides these two great lakes, and you have the Coorong at the other end, and it's quite dramatic landscape. He did all this incredible stuff, yet he wasn't a citizen, and yet he never let that define who he was. And his legacy is that he now, is on our currency.
I love the fact that it was a learning experience for you too, not just for us at the audience who discovered the sort of extraordinary polymath that he was, because he was talented in more than one field. And so I love the fact that you discovered that too. Now we're just going to pop a picture up on the screen now, and I was wondering whether you could tell us about the piece that we're looking at now.
So that was a work created in 2015 called Sheoak. It was actually when I was living in the Illawarra, and I went to the school and I was doing some work there, and my sons were going to the school, and I met some of the local mob that were doing some work with Bundanon, and they had been reviving the practice of making a stringy bark canoe. So they'd gone to the museum, they'd seen the stringy bark canoe. Bundanon had supported them in the community to revive this practice, and this wonderful man, his name was Steve. He's one of the Kumandichi artists from down the coast there. Anyway, he came in and he gave this incredible presentation, and I was I guess transfixed by what he was saying, but also about looking at the children and looking how a tree no longer became a tree, but this tree became a canoe, it became glue, it became rope, it became a shelter. I love that he was able to transform their idea of what, our living history that exists around us, those knowledge systems that are so alive with information. And, this, we know nothing of this information. There could be a cure for cancer in there, somewhere in these knowledge systems, and, medicine and food and how to sustain, country. So, our elders, they're like libraries, they have all of this information. It's not written. They sing about it, they tell stories about it, they teach dancers about it, they do paintings about it. And our responsibility is to spend time with our elders to, you know, ensure that information is passed on, it's preserved, it's maintained, it's that that information is shared and documented and saved. So it was this fascination with this tree, a sheoak tree, and it's a grandmother tree. They call it a sheoak. They used to put the babies underneath the sheoak tree because the snakes didn't like the sensation on their bellies of the sheoak needles. Yeah, it was this beautiful tree that was a medicine. It was food, shelter. It was a babysitter. And when you sit under a sheoak tree, it whistles, and there's this beautiful energy. So I wanted this sheoak to represent our experiences.
Well, I love the fact that that was a work that had its origin while you were down here and at Bundanon, which actually has been referenced by a couple of others in the Clifton Conversations as a place where they've done residencies. So just changing gear for a moment, Frances, lockdown we know has been an absolute disaster for performing arts companies across the country, and we still don't have any clear idea about reopening dates. I've already had to cancel some tickets for some Bangarra shows that I was looking forward to seeing. So what have you done with lockdown? Have you used that as a creative time to think about what you might like to choreograph next? Or have you been planning, or have you been reflecting?
As artists, we're so used to improvising and being adaptable and just doing what we need to do. When we're in creation, we go into the cave and we just do what we need to do very quietly. You know, it's something that is sacred. There's been some real positives. We've been able to do lots of outreach and do workshops, lots of community engagement. We've also been able to, we've got a whole new generation of young dancers that have come through. They hit the ground running. When they sign on the dotted line, they join the company. We've got back-to-back works. We're either touring one work and in rehearsal for the next, but it like you said before, it just keeps rolling, that machine.
Yeah, it's a machine.
So we've had this incredibly rich quality time where we've been able to kind of just teach some old historic repertoire, talk about the history of the era that work was created, what it was responding to politically, talk about the form, our contemporary Indigenous dance form, and the influences of that. For the younger dancers, they've loved the opportunity to learn the old repertoire and be able to know some of the back history and really kind of, I guess, unpack it and feel like that they can inhabit it more rather than just going on learning steps and doing them, and
sure.
Have a bit more of a connection to it.
Yeah. We've got a few moments left, and I just want to encourage everybody who's watching now, if you would like to ask Frances a question, there is a chat icon at the bottom of your screen and you can type a question into the chat box. Sarah Gardner, Frances, what are some of your current sources of musical inspiration? Nice question.
We have been, we were in the process of doing a new work with the Walmatjarri people from the Kimberley region, and I had such an incredible time up there hanging out with the old ladies, and they sit in the back of the truck. There's these 5 old ladies, and I had to, you can spend all day driving from community to community to pick up these old ladies and get them together so they can sing this song line. But you can't sing a song line unless the 5 of them are together. If there's 4 of them, it's like, no, we're not doing, so But yeah, I had this incredible, opportunity to get them ladies together, and it just was a blessing to have that experience, these ladies singing these songs that had been passed on to them. And it wasn't just when we set up the recorder and got them together, but it was like whenever, like in the back of the car, they just sung us everywhere, all over that country. And those once you have that experience, it really does, for me, that's the pulse, that's the I guess it's the heartbeat of the work. So I'm kind of living and breathing that now. Beautiful
Mm.
cappella, women singing. And I look forward to, in the future, next year, 2021, bringing Sandsong, to a theatre near you, and hopefully, share some.
Oh yes, oh yes, we're looking forward to that too, believe me. I've got another question coming in, which is, can you talk a little bit about the relationship between the dancer and the choreographer when it comes to developing a new work? I guess that's a very mysterious process for a lot of people, because we're generally not in the room watching that happen. And so I think for a lot of people that is very difficult to understand, in terms of how much input do you get from the dancers. There's an old-fashioned idea, I think, from ballet, that the bodies that are in the room are just there as tools, and the choreographer says, bend here, point that. But that's not how you work, is it?
No. And that was it. I think our practice has become something else. It's a lot more collaborative. I do a lot of research and a lot of preparation before I go into the studio. It's like a distillation.
Mm-hmm.
I guess a painter would do lots of studies. They would do maybe 20 studies, or until they find the right seed to the idea. So it's a bit the same with choreography. It's through the workshop, through just refining, through kind of getting closer and closer to what that the story is. It's a very close relationship. It's very collaborative, and a lot of trust, input, and dialogue, and it's very reciprocal, this relationship between a dancer and a choreographer.
You mentioned politics before, and the kind of political context for some of the work. With the Black Lives Matter movement happening now, I want to know what you want from your audiences. I want to know what you want from us, because I've listened to you talk about how good intentions are not enough and buying tickets to shows are not enough. So I want you to tell us what you want us to do.
As communities, when we come together, our voice is so much stronger. When we listen, when we make space for everybody to be heard, it doesn't matter what level of society, you all contribute. We all live this space together. So, I think, communities are the heartbeat of who we are, of society. When we come together, when we listen, I often felt like when I was down the coast, I was treated very respectfully. I think people want to grow. That's the thing. I don't think as Australians that we are unwilling to grow as a mature nation. We just don't have the tools and the leadership to give us the guidance. Once we have that, we're going to grow. But it's like teachers, when they ask me, how do I engage with my local Indigenous community so I can bring, more Indigenous content into the schools? And I say to them, don't think about the end product for a start. We're not here to give you content, but what we are here for is to enrich your school community. you can, I mean, you can do something really simple. You know, Coldale School started off with, you know, putting that flag up, and I lobbied for that. You know, when I took my sons to school and there was no flag, and I mean, they didn't understand. They, you know, they were kids, but for me, that one symbol really meant a lot to me. So, you know, each of those elders, you know, there should be an elder in residence in every school in Australia. That's like planting a tree. That tree is going to be there forever, and it's just going to enrich that school community. So, you know, it's all these little tiny things that make a big difference, and we can all do one thing. And what that one thing, you have to listen to your heart and know what that is. You know, you learn the local language group, or you know, you connect with the, you invite an elder into your school for a cup of tea. You know, there's going to be 1,000 cup of teas before that elder's going to want to share anything with you. And you know, that's fine. We've had so much taken from us, so we're, you know, they're going to be protective, but we all can do something. It's just you finding in your heart what that is.
Well, that's a beautiful note on which to end, Frances. I'm really inspired and motivated, and I think everyone listening will be too. I think, you know, there are books for us to read, there are films for us to watch, there are conversations to have, there are Sheoak trees for us to sit under and listen. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. We miss you. Come back and say hello, and please come back and perform as soon as you can. And thank you to everybody for being here this afternoon.
Thank you, David.